I'm a numbers person. I like numbers, but I think I like dollars more than numbers.
Welcome back, investor, for another episode of the Passive Income Adventures. If this is your first time here, this is a show where we talk about lots of different stories of how to get from where you are to living a passive income lifestyle. We all have to do this before we retire, and the age at which you retire is totally up to you. I think getting outside of the box and thinking about the rat race in a different way so that you can decide at what point you want to be living on most or all of your income coming from passive investing. Here we're powered by commercial real estate, but we tell all sorts of stories from all sorts of people making their passive income in a variety of ways, either through their jobs where they take their extra money and be able to invest that, or entrepreneurs who are out there making multiple streams of income so that they have more money to invest. Even if you're actively involved, eventually it gets to the point where you have to get passively involved so that you can be able to retire at whatever age it is that you choose. Being able to design your own lifestyle and your own retirement is what we're talking about today with Ciaara Hoffmanm. She's in Chino, California. She was in Salt Lake City recently. We got together and we sat down and just talked all about her business, her past, and I thought it was a fascinating story. She's just at the beginning of her journey, but she's using the tools that she had in her previous life as a mortgage lender and her husband as a real estate investor educator, as a real estate investing educator, to really make some huge strides into their passive income journey very quickly after deciding that they needed to figure something else out. So come along for the ride, see what Ciaara has hatched up, the successes that they've had, and what they're working on right now, and the future that they're looking at in their passive income journeys. Ciaara has a lot of things in her story that we can all relate to, and I know that you're going to learn a lot. We really dive deep into how to get started in a commercial real estate investing business, and then how to convert that into passive income over a period of time. We have just hit that 5-year mark and are now full-time investors. And Ciaara has just hit her first big deal. So come along for a listen and get some inspiration so that you can get ready to take your passive income adventure journey, so that you can go on your passive income adventure. Thanks for joining us today, investor. We have Ciaara Hoffmanm with us today from Synergy Capital Investments. She lives in Chino, California, and she is making the shift from a loan officer 9 to 5 over into the passive income adventure lifestyle. And today she's going to share with us what her turning points were, why she decided to make this shift, what she's doing right now to make sure that they are reaching their goals. And then the most fun part of the show, that she'll talk to us about what her passive income adventure bucket list items are, either personally or professionally. So thank you for coming out and sharing your story with us today, Ciaara.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emma, for having me on the show today.
Yeah, so let's just kick off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you started off on this journey of thinking like, I want to do something a little bit different than the beaten path.
I've been in the mortgage business, the residential mortgage industry for several years now, worked my way up to a sales manager and was making really great money until 2022. We know how it happened to the rates. They just started to skyrocket very quickly and overnight. Not just myself, but pretty much everyone I was working with, we all went from making 6 figures down to maybe $5,000-6,000 a month. So we're like, oh crap, what are we gonna do now? For me, I had already been doing commercial real estate on the side. I knew I wanted to do that for a long time. And last year, middle of last year, I did join a mentorship company because my husband knew someone who had been in that industry. My husband actually works for all these seminar companies, a lot of real estate companies. And so that's where I kind of was familiar with commercial real estate, because I would go to some of his events and just sneak peek a little bit into what he was doing over there. And I was like, hey, one day I'm going to save up enough money to get into one of these mentorship programs so that I can basically leave what I'm doing and just have more of a real estate empire, which for me, in my mind, I'm like, I just want to own like hundreds, thousands of units and just, I don't know, just be like the queen of real estate, right? Once the market shifted and the rates went up, obviously the company that I was working at, they weren't prepared for that huge shift. I decided, okay, I'm just going to go full force into commercial real estate and I'm just going to do it full time basically. So that's what I'm doing now. Rather than find another W-2, I thought it would just make sense to focus on the business full time. I did have a nest egg saved up from those several years that I'd been making good money. So I had enough to just go in with both feet, so to speak.
That's such an important detail that you mentioned. When you have put aside some emergency fund Sometimes you don't know at the beginning what you're going to use that for. Is it just going to protect from a layoff or an economy
Yeah.
downturn, a business downturn?
Hmm.
But then when you really want to make a change, there it is sitting there allowing you to make a serious adjustment to your life path. And the mortgage industry in 2022 would motivate anybody to make some serious life changes.
Yeah, and I had become accustomed to making a certain amount of money, and then when that goes away, you're like, okay, well, crap, like I need to figure something out here. And with the multifamily, I know it's going to be a long road. So our goal is basically a 5-year plan. It's down to 4.5 years now, but in 4.5 years is when my husband's kids turn 18. So they'll be moved out of the house and we're
Yeah.
going to be basically free to travel because that's what we both love to do. I've been to 25 countries so far. And so that's
Nice.
basically our motivation for wanting to do all of this is just be able to travel and be perpetual in a different country, spend a month in a different country throughout the whole year is the dream.
Yeah. It took me a long time to talk my husband into doing like the nomad thing, especially since we're doing it with our kids. It's
Yeah.
just not something that was on his radar, something he really wanted to do. And I remember when said when I realized that real estate could not just protect us from a layoff and these kinds of things, make a good income while I don't have to work full time, when I realized it could retire him as well, I said, let's
Hmm.
figure out what we're going to do after retirement. Cause that's what most people complain about when they finally hit financial independence. They retire
Yeah.
early. They have this kind of goals crisis where they're sitting around
Hmm.
like, now what? You're so focused in. Athletes talk about this a lot when they retire from their sport and they just go through this lost period. And so I told him,
Hmm.
hey, let's just go travel. Let's just go nomad. Let's go live abroad again. It's something I've
Yep.
done before him and done before kids. And
Yeah.
he said, we've been doing it my way for 20 plus years, with W-2, live in one place, settle down, all of that.
Yeah.
And he said, it's time to do it your way. And so he really got on board at that point. And then we started talking about it more, and the kids started
Yeah.
getting on board. And I think that was even more important. So it can be
Hmm.
really scary, and
Yeah.
it's a different kind of lifestyle. So what is it about that drew you to it enough to think we're going to make some serious changes and take some real action to achieve this? Because most people talk about it, but they don't actually ever go do it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I just love adventure. I love change. I get bored pretty easily.
Mhm.
I'm the type of person that if I'm in the same W-2 job for like right around the 1 year mark is when I start to get antsy. My husband actually prods me a little bit because I do tend to probably jump ship too early sometimes. And so he's the more grounded person, maybe similar to your husband, like, no, like you got to give it another year or so before you start changing things up. So it's balance. We help balance each other out that way. Yeah, traveling is something we've always been interested in. My husband, that's how we met. We were both not in the city that we lived in when we met. We were both traveling. And yeah, when he actually proposed to me, the first thing, like I didn't know he was going to propose. On the way to proposing to me, he's like, "Well, where do you want to live?" And I was like, I don't think I want to live anywhere. I just want to travel and just be in different places and not have a certain home because I don't know if I can commit to being stuck in one place for a long time. I'm used to just being a nomad, like what you're saying.
Yeah, I know in when we were talking, because you came to Salt Lake City and we went out, met in person, you and your husband, and we just had a fantastic conversation. And yes, he may be the more grounded of let's get a home and settle down and put some fence posts in the ground. But at the same time, he has a pretty good real estate background. So he's already dabbling around in that
Hmm.
and really had jumped in with both feet onto the residential side. Can you tell us more about what your portfolio looks like maybe right now, or what it looked like maybe a year ago before you're like, hey, you know what, let's jump into
Yeah.
this commercial thing?
Before we got into commercial, we had dabbled in doing fix and flips. We did a couple of wholesale deals and just like here and there. My husband's probably been more involved in it than I was, but when I came into the picture, we done maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 deals that way, just small. And then we also did do Airbnb, which I enjoyed a lot more. I liked doing that. And so one of our goals is actually to have 12 Airbnb. So each month we can be in a different spot and just stay there for the month. So that's on the bucket list as well. But yeah, so we did 4 or 5 of those. And so pretty much what we're looking at right now is I am asset manager on 232 units. So that was technically our first deal was So it's a big jump, right? Going from a couple little small deals here and there to all of a sudden we thought big. And so we're like, hey, we're going to try to find like a 200 unit. And so our first deal ended up being 232 units in Mississippi.
There's nothing like thinking big to actually make it happen. Sometimes you think big and it doesn't happen. And sometimes people stumble into opportunities where they're not thinking big. But
Yeah.
for the most part, it's the people doing big stuff or the people who dare to dream the big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're doing right now. Can you share with us how you basically broke into the game at that level? What it
Yeah.
took from you, the network that you had, the skills you needed to develop to basically land that first opportunity.
I told you about the mentorship program that I joined. And it was really during that first 3 day event that I attended that my mind opened up because he was talking about how the amount of time and energy that you put into finding like a 20 unit property is pretty much about the same as
Same.
finding like a 200 unit property, right? So you're still going to do the underwriting, you're still going to do the same amount of analysis and market research and all of that. And then when you're actually close on the property, you have to manage it. It's actually easier to manage a 200 unit because you're going to have a big property management company. You're going to have your own on-site manager. You can have a full-time maintenance person, right? But if you just have a 20 unit, it's just actually not as easy to scale. You're not going to be having a full-time management person. It's just like everyone's going to be a part-time thing. And so the amount of work that you're putting in personally, you're still meeting with that property manager every week and putting the same amount of time into it. So I was like, okay, so I'm just going to go big or go home, that kind of thing, right? So that's how I thought about going into the bigger 200 unit properties.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're still open to doing smaller deals as well. So I do review deals between 50 and up is usually what we're looking at right now. And I am on the acquisitions side for my team. I realized early on that underwriting was not my strong suit. So
Oh.
my background is actually more on like sales and working with people. So I'm more of the broker relations, and I'm glad that I was able to team up with people that are good at the underwriting. I thought I was going to be good at it because I am a numbers person. I like numbers, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I like dollars more than numbers. I like money. So that's kind of how that
Oh.
that panned out. I was like, I like numbers, but I don't feel 100% that I can be the person that's doing all the spreadsheets and things like that. There's people that are better than that, better at that stuff than me. So I let that our underwriters handle that, and I just focus on building a relationship with brokers and sponsors.
And it's a really good point that you bring up because you need to figure out like what your skill set is and what it is that you can contribute. We had a financial manager on a project that we did where he's a double major in finance and accounting, and we he has a job as an analyst at a very large company. And one day we get on the phone and he says, how are we going to keep our books? I said, we're just going to get QuickBooks online. And he goes, I don't know how to QuickBooks, because he's at such a high professional level. They're not using QuickBooks in his company. And so he said, let's just sit down for 20, 30 minutes, run me through how to do QuickBooks. And then he was able to take that over. But a couple of months later, on another partnership that I had, my partner who was taking care of the financial stuff had just gotten too busy and it was eating him alive on time. And so I reached out to this other partner. I said, hey, can you build us a pro forma? We'll pay you your whatever your rate is to build something like that. And he says, why doesn't so and so do it? And I said, because he doesn't have time to do it and it just needs to get done. And so we have to look at alternatives. And he said, you're right. If I could be out there like him, making $10,000 an hour, raising capital,
Yeah,
putting deals together, all of this, he goes, I wouldn't be doing $50 an hour jobs either. And it
right.
just
Yeah.
hit me like the financial person is the person that you hire. It's
Mm-hmm.
a paid per hour type of position. And so while a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
glorify it, I think that most of us don't realize like that as long as we can read the reports, we don't have to make the reports. And so it
Yeah.
sounds like that's what you landed on as well. Despite coming from a financial mortgage background, you're like, yeah, let's outsource this.
Exactly. Yeah. I've been in finance, and my skill set, I would say, is project management. Like when I was a sales manager and I was teaching people how to be on the phones, what to do, and just managing all these people, that's what I really enjoyed. I was good at the numbers, but I use calculators and things like that. I'm not good at doing numbers in my head. It's more of the people aspect of it that I liked. And that's what I realized.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways that's more important. You can't really outsource networking. You just can't do it.
Yeah,
And so people who
exactly.
like it and people who are good at it, that's why there's such heights of success is because that's something that you really can't delegate unless you have a partner who you delegate it to, but you're going to raise more money and find more deals if you're out there networking. You just need to be able
Hmm.
to read the numbers, maybe not do the
Yeah.
research. So,
Yeah.
so turn the corner with us now into the present day and
Mhm.
tell us what it is that you're working on right now that is working for you. I know you're on the
Sure.
acquisitions side of things and that you're looking for your next opportunity, but what is
Hmm.
it that you're doing right now? And maybe give us some examples of some important skills that our listener could
Sure.
maybe identify with so that they can see, oh, yes, I have the skill and I can contribute in this way.
Absolutely. So I think for me, what I realized is I really do well on the acquisition side of things. Some people, maybe they're afraid to pick up the phone because our team has tried to join, get more acquisitions people on the team. But we
Mhm.
realize that some people just don't, I don't know what it is, but they don't pick up the phones. They don't make the calls. It's not that hard. I have the phone numbers. It's easy to find these brokers. Their numbers are online. And so all I basically do is we identify which markets we want to get into right now. We're looking at Texas, Florida, Oklahoma. Those are the kind of the main areas that I've been focused on my end here. And so we just contact brokers in that area. You can find them online. LoopNet and Crexy, people say we can't find deals on there, but you can find brokers who have deals, and
Yes.
you can call them up and you can get on their email list. And as long as you can have a decent conversation with them, you do need to sound confident and you know what you're talking about. And they're going to throw acronyms at you that if you're brand new and they hit you with these questions you don't know how to answer, then that's a red flag for them and they might not send you anything. So you do have to be somewhat savvy. But definitely one of the things that I was taught early on is start your first few calls in a market that you're not interested in going into and just practice. Just most people aren't interested in investing in like California, for example, New York, those kind of places. Just start calling brokers in that area, see what kind of questions they ask, and just get your feet wet, so to speak. And that way, once you've made a few of those calls, then you can move into the actual market that you're interested in getting into.
You mentioned two really important things here. One, back in the beginning, you know that your husband works for a company that teaches people real estate education, and you knew you wanted
Mm-hmm.
in on that way. And so you were able to get yourself into a position where you could afford that and really start taking
Mm-hmm.
part in it. But a lot of people look at getting that education as like the secret, it's only a
Mm-hmm.
gateway.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, but what you go on to mention is the action that you're taking. And you
Yeah.
said that you're doing something, you're practicing, you're getting the wiggles out, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, getting in there and actually getting stuff done. And so, how are you able to make the shift from just learning and education, going to conferences, seminars, consuming what you had purchased? Because a lot of people don't even consume what they purchase.
Hey, that's
But
true.
then, if they do, sometimes they don't make that pivot into actually taking
Yeah.
action. So, what's the difference for you?
I read this book a while ago, back when I was in college, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of
Yes.
the things that really hit me in there, I was like, I don't know the exact words that they used, but they said basically what you want to do is when you're learning something, you learn a little bit and then you take action on what you just learned. It's not learn, and then take action. It's learn and then immediately implement what you just learned and then learn again and then take action. And that's how I've lived my life, is just learning a little bit, taking action on that thing right away. I don't like to wait more than maybe 24 hours before taking action, because if you
Mhm.
wait, then it'll probably never happen.
That's a really good point, and I think something that we were really trained to do, because we look at all this time that we spend in high school and college, years and years of not ever taking action. My daughter's in engineering school right now, and she's
Mm-hmm.
terrified of getting out into the marketplace because she's not really sure if what she's learning is going to be applicable to a well-paid position. She's basically making an investment of her time and her money in engineering school, and she's not really sure if it's teaching her
Mm-hmm.
what she has. So she actually went out and got a long-term position at a small engineering firm just so she could spend time around engineers and see what they were doing, because she realized that learning, even when you're taking a test, you're applying it, taking
Yeah,
action
yeah.
to pass the test. It's not the same. It's not the same thing. So actually getting out and practicing. So that is basically the same thing that I did. I started calling up for sale by owners on LoopNet, and for
Mm-hmm.
sale by owner, they did talk your ear off, right? And I could ask all sorts of questions. They're not out there necessarily to vet me. They just really want to sell that property. Now, some of them were vetting me out, but for the most part, they were extremely helpful, very, very friendly, and they were able to just answer questions and we'd have long conversations. I learned so much from the owners actually operating these smaller properties. And then when I got to the point where I started calling brokers, I did the same thing. I started in a market I didn't really care about, a city I had spent some time in but didn't really want to invest there. And so those tips and techniques to help you get over that issue are really, really important. But then you said one more thing that really caught my attention. You don't know why people can't make the call. You have the
Right.
numbers, you have the information. It's easy, it's no big deal. And that's the phrase that you're looking for when you're trying to identify your skill set. It's what other
Mm-hmm.
people are not willing to do that to you, you just don't understand. You just don't get it. You're like, why is this so hard? That's the thing, like ding, ding, ding. That's what I should be contributing. So that's really where you ended up landing is that thing is like, fine, this is
Hmm.
easy. I'll take care of it. But it's not
Yeah.
easy for everyone. And sometimes we have a tendency to undervalue the things that we think are easy that other people think are hard because it's easy.
Hmm.
You don't really think it's worth much. So, how do you basically come into that and say to yourself, no, this is a really important skill. Obviously, other people aren't going to do it, but I like it. So, I'll do it. So, what does that look like
Yeah.
now?
Right now, I actually have a virtual assistant who helps me manage all of, because I do get a ton of emails, like all these
Hmm.
brokers are sending me deals every day. And for me, just it can get overwhelming if I don't have it all laid out. So I actually have my VA. I forward her all the emails. She puts it into a spreadsheet for me and she'll have everything like what city is it in? What's the cap rate on it? What is the price per unit? And everything will be laid out for me so that I can just look at the deal. And usually in a few seconds, I can pretty much tell if it's worth going further into that deal or just telling the broker, we're going to pass on that one. So I did create systems for myself to make it easier, and she also puts the broker's number and email, so I can literally just call them up right there and just tell them why it worked or why it didn't work, or ask them further questions if it's something that we are interested in doing. So that's my first thing that I do after I do my workouts and everything. I sit on my computer and I set aside 1 hour per day to review that spreadsheet and call up these brokers. The most important thing you want to get done in the beginning of the day. If you're in acquisitions and you're in broker relations, that's what you should put as number one priority in your morning.
I've often heard people say that business systems are just a fancy term for a to-do list, like a checklist. And so if you have a checklist and you develop systems around it, sometimes that can be overwhelming because when you first start, you're like, I don't know what to put on here.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us some of the very first things that you put on your to-do list or your business system where you didn't know what you were doing, but you just needed to start
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. What that first 2, 3, 5 items look like?
Yeah. Do you have to have a sense of what kind of deal you're looking for in the beginning? For most people, that would be like unit count. You need to know, are you looking between 20 to 50 units, 50 to 100? So I put unit counts on there. Year built is another one that most people sponsors. So if you don't have a sponsor already, you want to talk to your sponsors and figure out what year of build are they looking for. They call it, in commercial real estate speak, it's called the vintage. So if you're talking to a
Mm,
broker and they're like, what vintage are you looking for? And we want
like
a
wine.
1970s. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like a wine. So 1970s vintage or newer. That's what our team is looking for. Most of these things that are online, they won't list the price,
Mm,
but you're going to have to talk to the broker and ask them what the price is. And we call it the whisper price. So
mhm.
that's another term that you'll want to use with the brokers. What's the whisper price on this one? So I have that on there. Another thing that we look for is just what's the net operating income. So they're going to get financial statements that you're going to want to review, and just usually there at the very bottom, it'll tell you what the net operating income is, and that can give you a sense for, am I close in the price versus the amount of income? Like, how long is it going to take for this income to pay off my initial investment? And so those are just the few of the basic things that you probably want to start off with. And then obviously we've added more things as we've learned and grown over time. But think though, if you're not sure like where you want to invest or what you want to do, those are really three great things to start off with.
How would you talk to somebody who would prefer to skip the entrepreneurial phase of this passive income journey? Because in your situation and in my situation, there was a job loss or a loss of income of some sort that made us say, hey, we need to basically get a side hustle or a different stream of income. We're going to run this as an active business. But for people out
Mm-hmm.
there who have not had that happen, they're in a career, a position that they really love, they're making great money, and just setting that money aside and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get in on the passive income lifestyle? I really don't want to have a real estate business.
Mm-hmm. And it's not for everybody. Some people aren't interested in just running a business. They just want to make passive income, and maybe they love what they do, whether it's even doctors, professionals, people that are in the service industry. They maybe don't have any interest of going into real estate, which is perfectly fine. There are ways to get involved without having all of that. So if you do have some capital set aside and you don't want to be the manager of the business, you can use your income and you can invest in a syndication, find a reputable operator, research them, listen to their podcast or their YouTube channel or anything like that, and just get to know them a little bit. You can always book calls with these people. Anyone who runs a syndication is more than willing to spend time getting to know you over the phone or Zoom, and just invest passively while you're doing your full-time W-2. There's nothing wrong with that. But of course, the only thing that you would need is capital to get into it that way. Typically around $50,000 is the minimum to get into a multifamily syndication.
So for you and I, the reason that we got involved in commercial real estate in the first place was because we were looking for more income. Like you have to have a certain amount of cash to be able to invest it so that your money's working for you rather than you working for your money. And everybody has
Mm-hmm.
a different path to get there. I noticed that a lot of people come through the real estate entrepreneur path, but as my kids are getting older, 18, 20 years old, they're asking how to get involved in real estate, but they don't really have a way to make money. Real estate businesses are a real hustle, a lot of fix and
Mm-hmm.
flip, huge numbers, risky decisions, like things you have to make decisions without all of the
Mm-hmm.
information because you're basically trying to predict the future. And so there are certain things that I like to invest in that I don't want to run, like tech startups are a good example. We do
Mm-hmm.
tech startup a little bit, but I have zero desire to ever actually get into a tech startup as a founder. I don't even want to work in a tech startup. I feel like I make more money in real estate because I'm willing to do that hustle, but it's
Yeah.
a lot of work. You're an entrepreneur. You're really running your own business. There are very few jobs out there unless you get some sort of a college degree in real estate development or something and go out and work for a large real estate company or a large fund. Most of it's just small entrepreneurs just hustling around trying to get what we're getting
Mm-hmm.
done. I think that that's a real misconception in the industry that these apartment buildings are owned by huge companies, huge funds that have a whole team of people working for them. But look at the 200 unit that you just did in Mississippi. It's a couple of people and a couple of investors, and you're out there just getting it done. And so, what can you say about that stereotype of what kinds of people own these large apartment buildings?
There are institutional investors that are going into and buying large apartment buildings. They're looking for a certain type. Usually, those are very low risk, class A, turnkey properties. They're not really looking for the value add where you go in and you can renovate. And some of the more higher risk properties, those are pretty much done through a lot of syndications like myself and other people that are looking to go into a property that is currently just not performing as well because maybe there's poor management, maybe there's just they're not operating well because they're not executing on maintenance requests. That's the biggest complaint for most tenants that leave a property. It's because maintenance requests are not being done in a timely manner. But pretty much the main goal is when you take over a property is you want to increase the net operating income. So you want to basically increase income and lower expenses. And there are many ways to do that. One of the most common ways is by renovating the units. If they haven't been updated for 20, 30 years, there's a value add opportunity right there for you to go in, make these homes more nice for people to live in, give them brand new appliances, new flooring, paint, things like that. And then you can bring it up to market rent, right? We're not overcharging these people. A lot of people complain, oh, you're increasing people's rent. We're just bringing it up to market. We're putting it, when we put money into these places, it costs money to do that, right? So in order for us to be able to provide those kind of services, we do have to be able to charge the amount of rent that's going to warrant a return on that investment as well. So that's pretty much the plan. And we usually hold these properties for an average of about 5 years is what we're looking at, sometimes sooner, just depending on if we've met our returns for our investors or not.
I don't know.
Right.
So Our goal is usually to take the property out of the hands of a mom and pop operator who's basically been using it for retirement cash flow, and they haven't been putting the investment back into the property. Like you said, if it hasn't been renovated
Mm-hmm.
in a while, it needs to be renovated. We say every
Mm-hmm.
10 years, it needs to have a once over. The nicer the property is, the more often that needs to be done. But if we can take it off the hands of a mom and pop who haven't been putting those capital expenditures in it, fix it up, get it up to market rent, and then our goal is to sell it to somebody who doesn't want to do a value add. It's less risk if there's less work that needs to be done. And so if it's a
Mm-hmm.
larger property, we can turn it over to an institutional investor. But if it's a smaller property, we can turn it over to what we call the coupon clippers, the people who are just looking for consistent cash flow, low risk type of
Mm-hmm.
situation. The returns tend to not be as big because risk adjusted returns, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time it is a lot easier to manage that property, and now they have a great starting point where if 5 to maybe 10 years down the road they can be putting those capital expenditures in little by little by little instead of letting them all build up, just ignoring the property, taking all the cash
Mm-hmm.
flow, and then suddenly you have this disaster on your hands that you can't afford to fix. And that's basically where you and I come in with somebody who's, man, we just let this thing get too far away from us. That's the worst time to sell a business. You're going to take a hit on values. And that's what we're looking for. People who are tired of it, or a business that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of on the way down. And then we can usually get it for a really good deal. And then we sell it to people who don't want to buy value adds. They just want something that's done for them. If you look into the future, if you pull out your little crystal ball, which I know right now it's crazy, the economy right now is pretty crazy and it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on. But you said you had a 5-year plan, which is the same thing that my husband and I set for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. What do you see happening both in your business and your personal life in the next 5 years? What passive
Mm-hmm.
income adventures are you planning?
5 years, it's kind of like our retirement date or early retirement date. But I say that, but I actually love working. Like I said, I get antsy, right? So I don't think I could just be on the beach all day, every day. I could do that for periods of time, but I feel better about myself. I feel more productive when I'm actively doing something. And so I see myself still managing my properties during my retirement and also just having the freedom to travel. So I do like to outsource things, and I do like to have managers, virtual assistants, and asset managers that are running most of the things. And I just overlook all of these things. That's what I'm good at, is just overseeing everything, make sure everything is going according to our business plan. We're still going to have our properties. Probably the long-term goal is to have probably 2,500 units. And that's when
Mhm.
I think I'll feel comfortable in saying, okay, we're going to retire now or semi retire at least. And yeah, and then we have huge goals to build our own house. As far as our personal goes, we do have a blueprint in mind of exactly the house that we want to build, and just basically be off grid is the plan. Is we want to have our own food, grow our own food and chickens and everything, and just be independent that way as well. And yeah, just like I said earlier, we're just going to be traveling most of the time.
Yeah, you're going to get the best of both worlds. We have some friends who travel full time, and they came to our ranch where we had livestock and our chickens and our gardens and all that. And they were sitting there and they in their RV and they were like, wow, this is pretty cool lifestyle that you've made for yourselves, but I don't think I could do this and give up the freedom of the travel that we have.
Mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm.
what they ended up doing was buying a piece of land and putting their RV out there and then getting all their goats and their blackberry bushes and their chickens and all of the stuff. And they lived there for, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years. And then they left and rented it out to another family that wanted to basically homestead for a little while. And it ended up being the best of both worlds. And so I told my husband, I said, hey, having this little ranch that ties us down in a lot of ways doesn't have to. Let's get creative and see how we can live our lifestyle that we want to live while being able to have it all, right? And I did actually know that you had those aspirations as a former homesteader. That really makes my eyes light up. It's so much fun. And I just love sitting out there and watching the animals. And it's just such a
Mm-hmm.
stress reliever to just watch them lead such simple, straightforward lives. It's really enjoyable. What area would you guys like to end up in for that part of your journey?
Me and my husband, we have different opinions on this,
Yeah.
so we haven't settled on where exactly. I have in mind maybe Texas for that, and my husband, he really wants to do St. George, Utah. I'm not
Mhm.
totally sold on that area yet,
It's hot.
but I'm sure I'm sure we'll find something just about getting to. We still have time to figure that out. So we're going to buy some land. And one thing that my husband wants to do as well is actually get his pilot license so he can have a helicopter. So that will probably open up where we can live, because if, we have a
Hmm.
helicopter, then, we can be pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. My brother-in-law flies a helicopter. He's a life flight pilot. And we always wonder, hey, when your kids are a little older and you don't have to live like near the school or near civilization, just get in the helicopter and just fly away. It's a dream that a lot of us talk about, but that you are actually taking action to make it happen. That's the difference, is when you actually start talking about specific locations and you start making plans for it, you think this is a real thing. Like, we are really on the path and we are really doing this. How does that feel?
It's exciting and it's also scary, right? Because there are days when it's hard because you haven't found a deal yet. You've looked at hundreds of deals and nothing's penciling out. So it's about being consistent and just having that, like I said earlier, that 1 hour every day where you just sit down at your computer and no matter what's happening, you take the first hour and just do whatever your most important task is for that day, whether it's reviewing deals or underwriting deals or meeting with investors. Got to stay focused and listen to podcasts like this that are going to keep you motivated and keep you on the path so that you don't give up. Basically, don't give up in your first year if you don't have a deal yet. Sometimes it can take months, is what I've seen some people to get their first deal.
And you have to be looking for it every single day. I think that's really key. I know people who have been doing this, looking for a deal 2, 3 years, 4 years, and they haven't found anything. And when you really get down and say, how many deals are you underwriting every day? How many deals are you looking at every week? And in my case, I don't do acquisitions anymore because what you talk about is like, it's no big deal. Like, for me, it's a huge deal. Don't really like doing those activities. So when we shifted gears over to just helping people be able to place their capital into deals, whether they want to be active or passive, we have a pathway for
Mm-hmm.
both of those types of investors. But I remember when we were talking with your partners the other day, and you were asking us how we were finding our deals, and I said, you are finding them for us. The deals that we look at are actually pretty good, because by the time we get to them, they're already under contract. They've already been through due diligence with an experienced team. And so most of what
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at is actually pretty great. But on the front lines, like you are, you're sifting through a lot of stuff that is
Yeah.
just ridiculous and doesn't make any sense at all, looking for
Yeah.
that kind of golden nugget or the needle in the haystack.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Needle in a haystack.
Yeah, and you really have to love it, but you really have to be doing it. So I know that it does take a while, like you said, but at the same time, the actions that you're taking, you brought in an assistant to help you move through this. You have
Mm-hmm.
thought a lot about what you want to do in your long-term plan, so it helps to sustain you when things are getting difficult, and just
Mm-hmm.
actually getting down there and doing the work is really what it takes. We call it
Exactly.
passive income. It's like passive later.
Exactly, passive later. So, as much as everyone wants to have the passive income, unless you are just putting your money into a deal, it really is,
Mhm,
it's going to be upfront work and then it's part-time after that.
mhm,
It's going to be maybe an hour or two a week after you've got things going,
mhm.
but the front end is always going to be more intense.
Yeah, definitely. And I always say you have to have money to put into a deal. If you want to be passive, you have to have money. How do you get that money? That's where it's very, very individual. Are you going to run a business? Are you going to run a real estate business? Do you have a well-paying W-2 position? It doesn't really matter how you get the money as long as it's legal. And then you can have that cash to be able to invest. That's really the common thread that ties us all together as passive income
Mhm.
investors who are wanting to go on some adventures and not be so tied down by location or time or these types of things. So thank you for sharing your story with us, Ciaara. And how can people get a hold of you if they would like to look at some of the opportunities that you are finding so that they can invest with you?
Sure. No, I do have a podcast as well. It's called Commercial Real Estate Bosses. So they can check out my podcast. A lot of it is about multifamily. And I'm always open to speaking with anyone looking to get into the real estate business, whether as a passive or an active investor. I love talking about it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about how you can get into the business. I'm most active on Facebook. So you can find me on Facebook, Ciaara Hoffmanm. Ciaara is spelled Ciaara, and then Hoffman, and just reach out to me on Facebook and we can definitely get you into the loop.
And what's your website address?
So it would be synergycapinvest.com.
Nice. So definitely reach out to Ciaara after the show. We want to help you to figure out your quickest and best path to having more passive income adventures, no matter what that looks like. Hopefully, the stories that we're sharing with you show you that there are lots of different pathways to get there, but you'll start to see common themes coming through with the stories that we're sharing. And hopefully, you'll identify with some of them and we can help you figure out the quickest, easiest, and most fulfilling way to go on your next passive income adventure. So, thank you, Ciara. Thank you for joining us today to hear Ciara's story. Even though all the details are different, I'm constantly surprised at how similar the stories become. You'll see common threads running through people who are taking an entrepreneurial path to get there, people who are going into real estate specific businesses, people who are just earning income from their jobs and being able to invest that until they get to the point where they don't have to have that job anymore. You will start to see these themes come out over and over again. And watching people go on their own passive income adventures journey is so inspiring because we can relate to all of them in different ways. Be sure to reach out to Ciara and me after the show so that we can help you figure out your most efficient path. Just being able to talk to somebody who's on the same path that you are, who has been there, done that, a few steps or a lot of steps ahead of you, and we can look back and give one another advice. And Ciara is a perfect example of that. When we met for lunch with her husband, we were able to talk about a lot of the things that I was struggling with in my business that they had some insights in based on their previous careers that really helped me out. And so you never know what you're going to get when you are networking, whether you can give or receive. It's the way we get things done in this industry. So I encourage you to jump in and reach out to us. My website is www.highrise.group/contact. You can jump into all my socials there. You can book some time on my calendar, book a one-to-one accountability challenge, or check out any of the current investments that we have offered for accredited investors. Again, thank you for joining us on this passive income adventure.